What's up guys, welcome to this review of Yesterday. I went to an early screen preview of this, so what did I think? Well, it's okay, but what's it about? Well, it's about an aspiring singer who, after a worldwide blackout, wakes up to discover that nobody remembers the Beatles or their songs. And it kind of unspirals from there, as you'd expect an aspiring singer who's the only person on the planet who seemingly remembers these songs, remembers this band. He of course tries to rip them off and make them his own. And he gets pretty successful as a result of that. So like I said, I thought this was okay. The reason I think it was just okay is because at its core it's two things. It's on one hand just a pretty generic rom-com. It's about a couple who discover that they like each other, have this big moment. I don't want to get into spoilers just yet, but it goes beat by beat what you expect from a rom-com. Then on the other hand, it's this love letter to the Beatles and their songs. And it actually does a pretty good job of meshing them together. That's mainly because it's well edited, well directed. The problem though is that because it is a pretty generic rom-com at its core, is that it's pretty predictable. If you've seen a rom-com before, you're going to know beat by beat what's going to happen. You've got a pretty good idea exactly how it's going to end. You know exactly what the situation between the main characters is going to be at the end. So that's a little on the disappointing side. But it is a fun and enjoyable film throughout. And of course, a rom-com implies that there's comedy in there. This is written by Richard Curtis. He's done a lot of good comedies before. This is pretty funny at times. I think if you have a knowledge of the Beatles, which I don't really much at all, then you're going to get so much more out of this. There are in-jokes and references throughout the film. So if you know the Beatles, if you know their songs, the name of the albums, and so on and so forth, there's going to be little references, little hints of things here and there, which will probably add to the humour and the overall film. But otherwise, this is a really funny film. One of the things I really liked about the film is the themes and messages that it passes on. So it's all about artistry, originality, fame, about being who you are rather than trying to be something you're not. And I think it gets the message across really well. It puts these themes across really well. And yeah, it adds a bit of depth to the story and to the actual rom-com nature of it. The one disappointing thing I had is, as I just mentioned earlier, there's a blackout worldwide. That seems to be the incident where all of mention of the Beatles, all knowledge of the Beatles vanishes. Well, the disappointing thing is that, to me, as a fan of science fiction, that's way more interesting than the what if scenario that this film presents. So we never find out what happened, we never find out how it happened or why it happened. In fact, no one even mentions it really beyond the fact that, oh, this happened. And that's really kind of disappointing. But of course it would have been a really different film, it would have been a science fiction film if it went down that route. And of course it's a possibility, but I would have liked to have a bit more explanation there. It probably would have ended up being like an episode of the Black Mirror or the Twilight Zone had it gone down that route, but still, it would have been interesting, I thought. So to talk about the characters, as a rom-com, the central relationship between the two main characters is key. You've got Hamish Patel, I think his name is, and Lily James. Brilliant, both of them. They've got great chemistry together. They clearly get along. I bought into their relationship right from word go. They start off as she's his manager slash best friend. She's a school teacher. She's supporting him, and he's this aspiring singer who's struggling to find that moment that's going to skyrocket his career, basically. And throughout the film, it's a will they, won't they kind of thing, but if you've seen a rom-com, you know the answer to that already. But yeah, great acting by them parts. Lily James is brilliant. The problem with the characters in this film is that everyone except the main character, Hamish Patel, plays, everyone else is stereotypical. They're all pretty one note. It's like, oh, here's the stupid one, or here's the money obsessed agent, and so on and so forth. So they're not like the most detailed or in-depth characters ever, and Hamish Patel's the only one that really gets a really good look at the inner workings of him because he is the main character. Lily James gets some to an extent, but again, for most of the film, she's kind of just the love interest. I will say this though about the side characters, while they are stereotypical in one note for the most part, the side characters are the funniest characters in the film. So Joel Fry plays the stupid friend who ends up being like a road agent or like an assistant basically, and he has some of the best lines in the whole film. I've seen him in comedies before. He does do a good job of comedy. Then you got Ed Sheeran who pops up here in what I think is his biggest on-screen role to date. I could be wrong about that, but he's good. He plays himself. He does a lot of comedic things in here, but it's often at his own expense, so give him a thumbs up for that. And yeah, pretty impressive work from him. Then you got Kate McKinnon, who's always brilliant, always funny. Interesting thing about her role in this is that she's the closest thing this film has to a villain. She doesn't usually play villains. She usually plays rather zany and out there characters. Here she's playing a very grounded Hollywood agent, essentially. And again, she's the closest thing this film has to a villain. And she's still funny. She's still really likable despite that. But then she's just brilliant anyway. But because some of these side characters are one note and stereotypical, they can come across a little cartoonish at times, especially when they're coming out with these ridiculous one-liners. And yeah, they're just being a little stupid in places. But they're not bad by any means. And of course, this is a Danny Boyle film. I think Danny Boyle actually elevates the film from being just another rom-com. He adds a certain flair and style to things. He adds a bit of pizzazz to the whole film, and that's good. And if you've seen Danny Boyle's directing before, you can tell just by looking at this film that it is a Danny Boyle film. The way that it's cut, the way that it uses music, the way that it has superimposed elements onto the screen. It's full of style, full of flair, like I said, and it really does add something more to this film, making it more than just a rom-com. But in addition, there's also good cinematography. It's set entirely in England almost. There's moments here where it's in LA. They use locations really well. It's unusually bright though, so yeah, clearly this was filmed in the summer rather than usual UK weather. But yeah, unusually bright, but it makes it a very colourful, bright, light-hearted film for the most part. And of course, the soundtrack. This is a love letter to the Beatles, so almost every song in the film is a Beatles song, I believe. Again, I don't really know much about the Beatles. I thought I knew some stuff, but turns out, no, I know nothing. But yeah, the soundtrack's great. Hamish Patel, the lead actor, he can sing. I believe he sings all the songs himself in this film, and yeah, he's not bad by any means at all. So that works for the film's benefit. But the film's well paced, it's never slow, it's well edited, it breezes by. I think it's about an hour 45, an hour 50, something like that. Maybe a little longer even. But yeah, I was never bored, I never felt the film was dragging, I never felt like it was slowing down. So ultimately, this film's alright. It's a good rom-com with musical moments in there. As a love letter to the Beatles, I think it's a little on the lacking side. This is not a, oh, we love the Beatles film. It's like, oh, here's some of the Beatles' best songs. How can we pay homage to that? How can we pay respects to that? But it's not a biopic by any means. So that's what I thought of yesterday. I kind of recommend it. If you like Danny Boyle films, if you want to see a good, funny rom-com, that's just a good, enjoyable, fun time at the cinema, go ahead and see that. Although, chances are you're probably going to see Spider-Man Far From Home and Toy Story 4, so it has got some competition out there. I'm going to go into spoilers in just a second, but if you are going to leave, subscribe to my channel before you do that. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment, some feedback down below. Let me know what you thought of yesterday. And you can go to Twitter and Instagram and follow me at _Grant Burton. But, like I said, now it's time for full spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film, maybe go away, come back, watch the rest later. Otherwise, just watch the rest now, why not? Full spoilers. So, as you know, there are a couple of surviving members of the Beatles, Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney. They don't appear in this film at all. I don't know if they done a cameo or whatever, but they're not in this film. At least I didn't see them in this film. And I feel like that's a missed opportunity. I feel like there was a really good opportunity for them to say, oh, here's Paul McCartney, here's Ringo Starr, and to be like, oh, wow. And just to like hammer home, this is a film that's paying homage and respects to the Beatles. But yeah, it didn't do that. Instead, what it done is, because this is kind of an alternate reality kind of thing, John Lennon is in there, I don't know who played him. I think it was Robert Carlyle. I've been looking it up, and I can't find anywhere about who was cast as John Lennon. But yeah, it's one of the best scenes in the film. It's a touching, heartfelt moment because obviously John Lennon sadly no longer with us. But that scene's one of the best in the film. If it is Robert Carlyle, I think it is Robert Carlyle. It's nice to see him again. I haven't seen him in quite a while. So just a couple of things I want to address. When he starts using the Beatles songs and passing them off as his own, all of a sudden it's like these are the best songs in the whole world, and it's like, oh, this is the second coming of Christ. Now, yes, when the Beatles were coming out in whenever it was, the 50s, 60s, of course, there wasn't a huge music industry that there is now. So it's understandable that back then, that was kind of the reception of these songs and this band. But to have it set in modern day as if these songs are just coming out now and this is just one person, not a band, that's singing them, I find it a little hard to believe that all of a sudden he would be like the biggest thing in the world, the biggest musician and singer in the world. It didn't really do a good job of selling me on that point. And that's not to say that these songs are bad, because they're not. They're Beatles songs. But yeah, to all of a sudden like be like, these are the best songs ever written, this is the best singer, the best writer ever. It's just like, I'm not too sure about that. So one of the big issues between the two leads is that Lily James's character wanted Hamish's character to be famous. She was rooting for him all the way. Then he gets famous. He has to go to LA to capitalize on that, and she falls out with him because of that. So on one hand, she's rooting for him to become famous, but as soon as he becomes famous, she's like, no, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. There's obviously more layers to it than that, but it was a little odd how that was essentially what drifted them apart from each other. So, yeah. And that's about all I really want to go into in spoilers. There's not a lot to say about this film in that regards. It is fun, it is enjoyable, I did like it. And I kind of recommend it. So, yeah. Subscribe to my channel if you've liked this. Thumbs up, comment feedback down below. What did you think of yesterday? Yada yada yada. Twitter and Instagram at _Grant Burton. That's my review for yesterday, and thanks for watching.